Today we'll be looking at the anatomy of the vertebrae, that is the anatomy of the spine, the anatomy of the lumbar vertebrae, cervical vertebrae and the thoracic vertebrae and the sacrum. So this part is the lumbosacral part. So as you can see, we have lumbar vertebrae 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 and then the sacrum. So this portion is the anterior part of the lumbar vertebrae and this portion towards me is the posterior aspect. Now let us go one by one from the posterior aspect. So now this is posterior. What you are looking here is posterior and this part is anterior. And this is the sacrum. So this is the head end and this is the leg end of the subject. So let us go one by one. The posterior most structure which you are able to palpate in your back is called as the spinous process of the vertebrae. So as we all know, there are 33 vertebrae in our body, 7 cervical, 12 thoracic, 5 lumbar, 5 sacral and 4 coccygeal, which is united together. So there are totally 33 vertebrae. And this lumbar spine, it has 5 vertebrae. So this is the spinous process of the vertebrae. In between the spinous process of the vertebrae, we have something called as the interspinous ligament. And on top of this spinous process, we have the supraspinous ligament. So these are the ligamentous structure in the posterior aspect of the spine. So now, this spinous process, if you trace down, what you will get is the lamina. See, this lamina is the most important structure in the vertebrae. So this part is the lamina. The part which you are able to see here is the lamina. Okay. Now, when you are going to trace this above, this part is called as the superior articular process. As you can see, it goes and articulates with the inferior articular process of the above vertebrae. So if you can see like this, you will be able to make out the superior articular process here and the inferior articular process of the above vertebra. So this one is the facet joint, L1, L2 facet joint. This is the inferior articular process of L1 vertebra, which is articulating with the superior articular process of the L2 vertebra, and this is the facet joint and it is a synovial joint and it will have synovial fluid here. So this is about the inferior and superior articular process. The most important structure which we are bothered in spine is the pedicle. So this is the pedicle of the vertebrae. So I'll just try to rotate and show you the view here. So this is the pedicle. So basically this pedicle connects the posterior elements of the spine with the anterior vertebral body. So this is the anterior vertebral body, anterior part of the spine, which is predominantly the body. This is called as the vertebra or the vertebral body. It is getting connected to the posterior structures of the spine by the pedicle. So the pedicle is the most important part because in the vertebrae, in this spinal unit, the pedicle is predominantly made of cortical bone. Rest of the parts are made of cancellous bone. That is why the pedicle screw is very important, because the hold of the screw which you are going to insert from posterior to anterior into the vertebral body, it's predominantly, its main hold is in the pedicle. That is why it is called as the pedicle screw. And as you can see here, this structure connecting the posterior aspect or the posterior elements of the spine to the anterior elements of the spinal unit is the pedicle. Now, the lateral structure here is the transverse process. As you can see here, this is the transverse process, or in this vertebra, if you can see, which goes laterally, is the transverse process. In between the two transverse process, what you will have is the intertransverse membrane. So this is the lamina This is the facet joint, which is constituted by the inferior articular process of the vertebra above and the superior articular process of the vertebra below. This is the transverse process, and when I rotate the vertebra like this, you will be able to see the pedicle which connects to the vertebral body. So this is the vertebral body. Now, in between these two vertebral body is what we have the intervertebral disc. As you know, the disc is made up of an outer tough layer which is called as the annulus fibrosus and an inner soft jelly-like substance which is called as the nucleus pulposus. And this part is the anterior longitudinal ligament. It is present all over the spine, and you can see here, this is the anterior longitudinal ligament. And here, if you can see inside, I hope you are able to see inside this particular portion, this ligament is called as the posterior longitudinal ligament. And this part which you are seeing here, this is the axial view. So this is the spine in an erect individual. So what you are viewing is the AP view or the coronal view. Anterior part, this is the anterior part, and this is the posterior part. Now I am going to tilt it to the axial view. Axial view means you are cutting the body in half and you are viewing it from top or like this. So this is the vertebral body, and this is the spinal canal through which the spinal cord passes. But in this lumbar area, we are not supposed to call it a spinal cord, because the spinal cord ends at L1, and below that it is just the dura with the nerve roots or the cauda equina. So this is, along this you will have the spinal cord in the thoracic region or the dura with the nerve roots in the lumbar region. This is otherwise called as the spinal canal. Now coming to this model, as you can see here, again these are the posterior elements of the spine. This is the spinous process, lamina here, and the facet joint. And as I said, the dura with the nerve roots, it passes through the spinal canal like this. And at the end of the L5 vertebra, you have articulation with the sacrum. So this is the inferior articular process of L5 vertebra, and this is the articular process of the sacrum, and this is the L5S1 joint, facet joint.